Here we are yet again at the end of another part of the Way of Kings, and just like the earlier sections, this section has little epigraphs before each chapter. But what's kind of odd about this is that these epigraphs are yet again death rattles. So just like the first section. So there's a few that I kind of wanted to just go over. I don't know. I don't think there's really much that I can say about these. Most of them are very cryptic, and we don't really know the meanings of them, and they're just kind of interesting things. But I promise you, in a couple of chapters, we're going to find out some crazy stuff about these death rattles. So that's still to come. Here in this video, I'm only going to be talking about the death rattles that I think I kind of know what they're talking about. The ones that I just don't even have a clue, I'm just going to skip over them. First one I wanted to mention is from chapter 54. It says, "The burdens of 9 become mine. Why must I carry the madness of them all? Oh, Almighty, release me." So if we think all the way back to the prelude to the Stormlight Archive, right? It's like the very first thing you read in this book. The burdens of 9 become mine. So if there's 10 people and 9 of them give their burden to the one other person, we saw that happen. I think that's what that is referencing, but I could be wrong. Chapter 55 says, "A woman sits and scratches out her own eyes, daughter of kings and winds, the vandal." Now, this is something that I don't think you're going to pick up on if you're just reading the book, but if you have seen the discussions online, let's just say this might be in reference to the woman from Interlude 7. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Chapter 58 says, "Re-Shafir, the Midnight Mother, giving birth to abominations with her essence so dark, so terrible, so consuming. She is here, she watches me die." So this one, you can kind of put this one together, the word midnight and essence. So it says, "Midnight Mother, giving birth to abominations with her essence so dark." We saw some dark creatures earlier in the book, and they were called the Midnight Essence. So I think that's sort of in reference to those creatures, I guess. Here's a great one. Chapter 59. "Above the final void I hang, friends behind, friends before. The feast I must drink clings to their faces, and the words I must speak spark in my mind. The old oaths will be spoken anew." So this is in chapter 59. This is before we see what happens in, chapter 67, when Kaladin speaks the next ideal of the Knights Radiant. But I think this is in reference to that. It says, "Above the final void I hang." It was the final chasm that they were crossing. Friends behind, bridge 4. Friends before, maybe Dalinar's army, or maybe the Parshendi. I don't know. The feast I must drink clings to their faces. He sucks the stormlight from the gemstones in the beards of the Parshendi. So maybe it is referencing the Parshendi as his friends. That's freaking weird. I don't know. "And the words I must speak spark in my mind." So, right, he jumps across and all of a sudden he knows what to say. He recites the second ideal. "The old oaths will be spoken anew." So yeah, I definitely think that one is in reference to Kaladin and that scene from chapter, I think it's 67. Chapter 60, I won't claim to know what this is really in reference to, but it is sort of a weird mirrored parallel of the first ideal of the Knights Radiant. It says, "The death is my life, the strength becomes my weakness, the journey has ended." Here's a great one that will become clear right at the end of the book. It says, "I wish to sleep. I know now why you do what you do, and I hate you for it. I will not speak of the truths I see." Now, speaking of this, I want to mention below each death rattle, it says when it was recorded and who it was recorded from. And below that, it'll sometimes have little notes like, "This sample is considered not reliable," or "This sample is of particular note," or something like that. So then once you read a bunch of these, you start to think, well, who the heck is writing this down? Who's collecting these statements of people right before they die? And that death rattle right there I believe is in reference to that. Here's a cool one, chapter 65. "I see them. They are the rocks. They are the vengeful spirits, eyes of red." Remember, a couple of times already, maybe 3 times so far, starting way back in the prelude with Kalak, was that his name? Kalak? There were some sort of creatures made of stone, right? Remember that? So I think that's in reference to those. They were called thunderclasts in the prelude. Chapter 66, that chanting, that singing, those rasping voices. I think that's probably a reference to the Parshendi. Those are all the death rattles that I feel like, I kind of know what they're talking about. I could be totally off. I could be totally wrong. Let me know in the comments. Um, how dumb am I? How many of these do I just have way wrong? Are there other ones that you know the meaning of? There's a bunch that you can find if you look online. You can find the meanings of them. But I'm trying to avoid that sort of stuff. I'm trying to only talk about the ones that like reference things that we've already seen. But if you've read later books, there are a few that I think you'll notice if you read through the death rattles in this section. You'll say, oh yeah, that references this from Words of Radiance or Oathbringer or whatever. There's probably some that reference stuff from Rhythm of War, but I have not read Rhythm of War yet. So anyway, yeah, that's the death rattles from section 4.